All right. Got it.
And it's funny how it does notify you a little bit. It says you're going live. Got it. Got it.
Well, it's like in that case, you can leave the meeting if you really don't want to be live, which I don't know why it gives the host that option, because that's like kind of, it's like, well, why would I?
Really? It does that?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. It sounds stupid, and frankly, it sounds made up.
No,
Yeah.
not. Okay.
Oh, good. Tough doing this on a Wednesday night.
That's good though. I mean, otherwise we were gonna have to go like a long time without doing one.
I'm gonna have to ask the boss for a raise.
Jeez. Okay.
You know, this thing never lines up right. This thing never ever lines up right.
All right, yeah.
Yes.
The Wednesday evening edition. I thought for a second it was Tuesday, but then it's like all screwed up from it being Memorial Day.
Yeah, the holiday definitely screwed me up a little bit too. There's no question that it did. So, but it's okay. It's okay.
Hey, Jacob.
You'll learn there. What?
I said hi, Jacob.
Oh, I thought you, Jacob. I thought you called me Jacob for a second. I was like, what the hell's freaking wrong with you?
No, Jacob's look in the comments and hey, Jean. Hey, Miranda.
Oh, hey.
Jean is from Western New York.
Oh, we just
We
in
were
Western
sort
New York.
of in Western New York.
Yeah, we went right through Niagara.
Yeah, we were just and Elmira.
That's Western. If Worcester's Western Mass, then Niagara's Western New York.
Hey, David.
I think maybe you should learn your geography.
Hey, Barbara.
Anyway, so what's happening? It's weird doing this on a Wednesday. It's tough. After working today, working tomorrow, doing this tonight, had another meeting earlier. I'm telling you, I'm going to be asking for a raise, Fitcher. I'm going to ask for big money. The old Civil War Breakfast Club headquarters. Anyway, so that's good. So that's good. Hopefully people jump on. Hopefully everybody had a safe Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
And it's funny because this was your first Memorial Day weekend in the United States, and you weren't even in the United States.
Oh, well, I've been in I was here last year for Memorial Day.
Actually, no, that's true, because we were back in the States on Memorial Day. We came back on Monday, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And yeah, I was in the US last year for Memorial Day too, because we were in Gettysburg for Memorial Day. We saw the parade last year.
That's right. That's true. I forgot about that. So It's been a little while since we did this. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, it was a fun weekend. Hopefully you had a good weekend. It was fun keeping up with everybody's social media, seeing what everybody else was up to.
Yeah.
We had another Canadaran weekend for us.
Yeah, we did see a lot of history though, which was pretty cool. Not as much Civil War. I mean, we saw Civil War on Monday, like we saw Elmira, which you got that really awesome hat from them, which is initially mine, but then you took it from me. But yeah, we saw Elmira prison on Monday, and that was really it's not as creepy as Andersonville. It doesn't for some reason it doesn't have that same vibe, but it's still
it doesn't have the vibe at all. I mean, it doesn't. And if you're going to go up to Elmira, you want to talk to Doug Oakes and his wife Terry. They run the whole thing over there, and Doug is a Civil War historian, as is Terry. Terry's written a book, and you go out there, and it's unfortunately a good percentage of it is a neighborhood now, and I'm willing to bet that half those neighbors have no idea, despite the ghosts walking through their front living room. They probably have no idea what's going on there, right?
Yeah, the place was kind of creepy.
It definitely was. It definitely was, but it was. But the thing about it, though, is it's interpreted very, very well. And if you study it, and people don't really study a lot of the battlefields. I mean, the Confederate battlefields get all the ink because the perception is they were worse. And in some cases they were, in some cases
they weren't. You mean the
weren't.
prisons?
Yeah.
You were saying battlefields.
Battlefields. I mean, the prisons, the camps. And but again, these places, all of them were hell on earth.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what's interesting when you talk about Elmira and you get into the weeds, there are some differences between some of the ones from Florence and especially Andersonville. And the problem is that the danger thing is sometimes when you say things like that, people seem to think that we're trying to say Elmira was Club Med or something.
We're not.
Right. And it wasn't.
It was far from it. I mean, the guys had they had better accommodations. They weren't sleeping in tents. They were in barracks, and they had stoves and stuff, but it's a prison camp.
It still sucks. I mean, they probably had one cable station where I got stuck watching Indians games every night. I mean, it was pure hell for this.
So that was on Johnson's Island.
Oh yeah, no question. But I mean, yes. I mean, if you look at it, if you go to Andersonville, they did put them right into a field, and that was the end of it. Yeah. But Elmira, they did initially get them into barracks. Then they got tents, but they didn't finally get back in the barracks again until December of 1865. And it gets pretty cold in New York. It's October, November, December too. I don't know if you know that, Mary. United States, it gets cold sometimes. And
going
so
over.
so a lot of people did get sick, but they were brought back in again. And if you read a lot of the stories, I mean, of course, the diaries are miserable because their experiences were miserable.
Yeah.
But sometimes people, you get into that pissing match, which is worse. You
Yeah.
hear that sometimes. And there really isn't a comparison, but to say that Elmira was better than Andersonville, really what you're saying is Andersonville was worse than Elmira because they both sucked. They did.
Yeah.
And no one's going to sit there and anybody who's been there and try to explain to them like it was an easy ride, because it wasn't. It was just a little bit different. It was a little bit different.
Yeah, no, it was, and I mean, I've been to Johnson's Island and that was a miserable place. Now that's an officers camp, so not as many like
Well, that's in Ohio, right?
Yeah, right on Lake Erie.
Well, I was going to say no more. Of course, it's miserable.
Yeah, of course, but too, like some prisoners would escape and they would just, Lake Erie was frozen in the winter and they would just the guards would just chase them so far and they'd be like, fine, you can have at it with the elements, because the further north you go, the worse it's going to get. Oh, hey, Shanna. Shanna says hello from Virginia.
Shanna.
Hey,
Shanna was out and about this weekend too. She was on a historical adventure too, if I remember correctly.
Reenacting, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, very, very exciting. A lot of people reenact. You see LC's on here. He reenacts, and John Gentili reenacts as an Australian tourist, and we see him sometimes. and so it's good. It's good to see some people out here doing their things on history. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, Lisa's on here today. So we should mention that Lisa Samia's new poetry book, it had its release today. So you can pick it up on Amazon, I think.
That's right. Her books was out today. Somebody who's read her books. And so she's written a few now, and they all get better every time they write them. So keep an eye on her stuff, because she'll be doing a book signing at the Heritage Museum in Gettysburg, Mary. The Heritage, as the French say.
Yeah.
Who knows, but she'll be there doing that, and so that'll be cool. So we got some good things to talk about with that.
Miranda said, did they have the original of the Elmira drawing? I saw the picture you took of that.
They did.
Yeah, that was really cool.
That was pretty cool.
And Bill Etzkorn's on here. He said the Shohola train wreck was sending prisoners to Elmira.
The Shohola train wreck is one of those stories that never gets. We talked about, just for a quick minute. We were talking to Doug. So you've got, for those who don't know what the Shohola thing is, you've got a train full of Confederate prisoners, and I think it was leaving from New York City, and it's going through. It has to come through Pennsylvania. And it's going to come through Elmira, and but because just the way the tracks were, you had to kind of have one train come one direction, the other came another direction. They stopped, so they wouldn't collide. But they didn't. Something happened, and the trains crashed head speed on each other, head on, and it killed a lot of people, and a lot of the bodies ended up in the river, and they finally got them all, and they buried them in a primary grave pit right at the cemetery, the National Cemetery. And it's one of the few places where Confederate troops and Union troops, because there were Union men who died in that boat on that train too, were knowingly buried together. And there's a monument there. Yeah. And one half has all the Confederate names, the other half has all the Union names. So it's quite a thing, but that story was a brutal story. It really was. Yeah.
And you would ask Doug stuff, and he would just be like, oh yeah, I know that. And then his wife would be like, hey, Doug, tell them about this. Like, the two of them know it so well. And you can see that they're very passionate about it. Oh, Lisa says there's a poem called Shohola in the new book. That's cool. Oh, good evening, MJ.
So it's cool though. What's cool, after we did our little live with them on Monday afternoon. That was fun. But then we stopped that and we walked the perimeter of the park, and it was such a fun. I don't think we laughed so hard in a long time talking.
Oh yeah, he told so many stories because he's a reenactor. And he was like one of the hardcore ones. And like his, sometimes it was just the stories he had to tell were great. Like, just, they were really funny. Oh, Bill mentions that the coal and the wreckage is still there 10 miles from his house. So
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's up by that Scranton area, up by the thing. But what's good about Doug Oakes, though, is he was telling a story where he reenacted as one of the first Texas, Jerome Roberts guys going to the triangular fields, and they're marching up, and he's veering off, and the men are veering off more towards the Rosewoods, kind of where the 20th Indiana would realistically have gone, and he's screaming at them as a private to get back. You're going the wrong way. Finally, he says, "Screw this." And his wife says, "Doug, that's enough. We're leaving. Let's go." A kid thrown in the car. He's like, and his wife made him leave. This is like a couple of years ago too. He's an older guy.
That's so funny.
It's a fun. He's a fun story, and it was very accommodating. We happened to just mentioned somewhere that we were going to
Yeah,
Elmira.
I think it was on here. that
It
we
was on
mentioned
here,
it.
and
Yeah,
then you and I were sitting some bar
somewhere in
somewhere on
Goderich.
Sunday,
Yeah.
and he messaged us and said, "Hey, if you, I heard you come to Elmira, do you want to come check it out?" And we kind of didn't want to because we don't want to put him out on Memorial Day, like some dude's going to come out and open the whole place up, and
Yeah.
because it has to be, it's behind a fence.
Mhm.
But he was happy to do it, so we got there and we spent a good couple hours shooting the shit with him, and really he showed us every nook and cranny of that. We walked all the way through all
It was
the
really cool.
tick field. We saw where the dead house was. We went down where the smallpox little farm was. It was fascinating with some of the stories that we're talking about was when they were digging that neighborhood, building some of those houses.
Yeah, someone wanted a pool.
Well, they wanted a pool, so they dug in the backyard. They found a whole bunch of bottles, and the government made them stop digging because they're afraid of smallpox. Because that's where the smallpox thing was. And so so there's all kinds of cool little stories like that. But a story like him, if we were sitting at a bar telling these stories, it would have been dare in heaven. We would have had a blast.
Oh yeah.
But we're walking these neighborhoods, and he's waving to his neighbors, and he was. It's a good place if you get a chance to go up there. And Escort, I'm looking at you. You live not far away. You should absolutely go up to Elmira, and you should just message them. They'll come out and show you around.
Yeah, I think they're open on Saturdays. I think they're open on Saturdays, but he said that they are more than happy to do private tours like what they gave us. And it was a great experience. They're going to be starting a fundraiser, I think in August, kind of like a capital project, because they actually want to build like a visitor center and stuff. And we saw the plans for that, and it looks really like it's going to be a really cool place. And it's just important to tell the story of Elmira as it is to tell the story of Andersonville, and same with Johnson's Island. Like Johnson's Island has like a Friends of Johnson's Island Association, I think, and all that you can visit on Johnson's Island is just the graveyard because or the Confederate cemetery, because the rest of Johnson's Island is now privately owned. So they have a map kind of showing you where on the island the barracks were and all that, but they're all gone. And it's really like Johnson's Island is worth going to, even though it's just like a cemetery, but it's still worth going because it's got a lot of good information there.
Well, every place is worth going
on the
to.
list right after the Clara Barton House.
Oh, very cool. Yep, no question about that. But yeah, it's definitely worth it, and they're very accommodating. They'll show you around, and they've got a tiny little. I don't want to say museum. It's basically a garage in this little house. And they have a recreated barracks. And we did that live. We showed that, and it's really cool how they really made that almost the same specs that the actual ones would have been.
Yeah, they did their best too.
But it's fun. It's fun to do that stuff. But it was kind of unexpected. I thought we were just going to stumble through there and walk in the field and take some pictures and get the hell out of there. But it ended up being a pretty legit thing.
Yeah. Oh, Lynn's on here. She said, "Hey everyone, love the Facebook Live from Elmira." Thank you, Lynn.
What's going on, Lynn? No, that was a good time, and so that's what's cool about it is you meet these people like Doug, for example. It's like you've known him your entire life. You start talking about these stories. You ever hear the story about they built that tower? Oh yeah. They just go back and forth. And then we talked for must have been an hour and a half with them, and just nerding Civil War stuff and talking about Gettysburg and Antietam and all his reenactor stories and all the people he knows and the people things he's done. And that's what's great about it is the good thing about the Civil War community is the people you meet, the people you know.
Yeah, they are. I know there's been some talk that it can be kind of toxic sometimes, but on the whole, it's really not. It's a great community. Everyone, like for the most part, supports each other. There's here and there's some shit that happens, but whatever, for the most part, like you can go to Gettysburg or you can go pretty much anywhere that is Civil War related and strike up a conversation with somebody. Like Doug and Terry were very accommodating for us.
Yeah, they were.
Just to come down there, and they're like, no, we love doing this, like it's no problem. We just, we're so happy you guys are here. And it's like, well, we're grateful they gave us the tour of it, and we met some great people when we were out down south. Like we met Ed Lowe, who we are part of his Chattanooga Roundtable. He's a really awesome guy. He and his wife, nerded out about the Civil War with them for a while. So it's really cool. It's a really cool community.
No, they're good people. We Northerners, Southerners, we've had friends with all of them. So it doesn't matter. You're right. It's definitely a toxic thing. And it definitely is polarizing because I think more social media has done a lot of damage. I think we've talked about that. And unfortunately, people like to be right. People like to know what they think they know. Nobody knows everything. No one does. knuckleheads like us who try to tell these stories other people do. We're just telling stories of these people who did these heroic things, north and south, and it's really, and those are the ones who should be focused on, and not lashing on at people who do this stupid thing, because anybody could do it. It's just
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like, we saw John Cleveland Robinson's grave on Memorial Day, and we saw David Ireland's as well, which was really cool. And that cemetery was like where David Ireland and John Cleveland Robinson are. It's very like, and we were talking to MJ about this because she's been to the same cemetery. We were able to go out for dinner with MJ on Monday night, which was awesome. And just how the cemetery is just I've never seen a cemetery more in disrepair. What's the name of the cemetery again?
It's a spring something. It's spring something. I remember. I forget the name of it, but unfortunately, like most of the, when I say most, a lot of the gravestones are kicked over. There's trees that have fallen down. It's overgrown. A lot of the tombs are cracked. Even Ireland's is cracked in the bottom. It's. I've never seen anything like it. I've spent way more time in cemeteries than most dead people, I'd say, I swear, but I've never seen one like that. It was depressing, and especially the Ireland grave. I mean, it's still in pretty good shape, but all around the grass is overgrown, the foundation's cracked. They just don't take care of it. In the new section, it was Memorial Day, so a lot of people who came to visit relatives of previous wars, World War II, whatever. That section was nice. It was the old section that was falling apart, which is really too bad.
Yeah. It almost looked like, nobody had been there kind of thing in years. Like that's what I thought it looked like. And, Ireland's grave is kind of in the middle of it all. And John Cleveland Robinson is just like up from him, maybe a few hundred yards.
Yeah. So it's a great place to walk. It really, really is. And like anything else, the places you can go are really, really cool. And it's really fun to do these things. It really, really is. And, we've gone a couple of prison camps now in the last couple months, with the one in Georgia and the one in New York, and it's just as powerful as the battlefields. It really, really is.
Yeah.
And then they're not as visited as obviously the big battlefields are, but it's an important part of history, because if anybody, I had a relative who died in a prison camp, and a lot of people here. I see Miranda; she had a relative there in Elmira.
Oh, yeah.
It's a powerful place because people suffered there, and it's not to be made better, made worse, or to be scanned over. It's a shitty existence, and it's a real dark part of the history. And that's why you got to study that stuff too, and especially if you've got a relative, because it really hits home when you got a relative.
Yeah, and I mean, like Johnson's Island, there's all these there are a few unknowns there, which is that's sad to see too, But the cemetery is kept up very well by the group at Johnson's Island. And the cemetery at Elmira it's a national cemetery. It's really it is very pristine as well. But the one where David Ireland is, it's almost like the land that time forgot.
It's like when you'd see, it's like a cemetery you'd see in a horror movie.
Yeah.
With overgrown, or like the gravestones are all cracked over. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the Elmira one, and it's fascinating because this is where if you want to look at a real big difference between Elmira and Andersonville, is Elmira has, I think, just a couple of unknowns.
Yeah.
And both Andersonville and Elmira had about a mid 20% casualty rate, a death rate, which is high. But the dead at Elmira, it's about 2,900, so that cemetery is about the same size as the Civil War cemetery at Gettysburg.
Yeah,
the National Cemetery.
But you see more names.
Well, that's because what they did was they kept track. So when someone died, everyone got a coffin. They weren't just buried in a pit, and they made sure that they took the name in the regiment with them.
Yeah,
and they wrote them down. But they also took a glass jar, like a mason jar, and they put their name and their regiment inside the jar and buried it with the body right in the armpit next to the old Buster Kilrain wounding area. They put it under the armpit and buried them with the body. So in case they had to dig them up, they know who they were. Yeah. So they took care of the dead, and a lot of them did die. Almost 3,000 did die there out of the 10,000 that was put in there. But fortunately for them anyway, they didn't have that nightmare of dying without a name.
Yeah,
like a lot of the Drew Gilpin Foss talks about in her book, was their biggest fear. So, that's what I thought was one of the biggest differences about Elmira, no question.
AQ mentions Walnut Street Cemetery in Brookline, where Barlow was buried, and his family tomb in particular is in bad state of disrepair despite some of the efforts for restoration. That's true. We just visited there Was that August or September? And yeah, it's actually very similar to the one we went to where David Ireland's buried.
The one in Ireland was a lot worse.
Yeah.
But I will say that the one in Brookline needs some parking. AQ, you need to make that happen. You get killed up in that area of Brookline just because of the traffic in the area. But there's a lot of that, and a lot of the cemeteries you go to, for the most part, we just did the Spotsylvania episode a couple of weeks ago, and that cemetery is pretty pristine. And the Union dead are all over in Fredericksburg, and that's pretty pristine too. But it's sad to see some. We saw some of the ones in Chickamauga, these random gravestones just overgrown in the middle of the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the markers as well. And there's so Shanna mentions that she went to Laurel Hill in the 61 Western Virginia campaign and came across a neglected Confederate cemetery. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, and it was really sad. That would be really sad to see that, like something neglected like that.
Well, I mean, what do they say? Cemeteries usually they get visited for like 2 generations, then people stop going. But I think you see them from time to time, and we have one around the corner here with pilgrims in it and all kinds of people. But it's historical, so people always go up there. But some of these ones you see, then just no one goes to. But you gotta take care of them. And I know a lot of people do. They take care of the stones and they help clean up the cemeteries, and that's good God's work right there. But but it's tough. It's a tough place to go when you go to some of these. But the camps, though, the prison camps are tough. Because it's a different type of experience. When you go to a battlefield, you see the markers. They talk about what this guy did. This guy fought here. This guy fell here. But when you're in these you visit these prison camps, you get this feeling of just complete hopelessness, of just not knowing. It isn't like I know you've been in prison. I haven't, but I can only imagine how it must be. How it must be kind of confined and just. If the food situation is not good, the disease is running through, the feeling of just not knowing, your family doesn't know if you're alive or dead, depending on the cemetery. So it's a tough place to go. It really, really is. Like going to these cemeteries, going to these prisons are just as tough as some of the battlefields. Yeah. We went to Richmond to see Lisa's thing not too long ago, and Libby's gone, but you can still go down to the area where it was. You can still go to Belle Isle over there, across that bridge.
Yeah, Belle Isle was creepy.
And just imagine how shitty that must have been.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Miranda said she's often wondered how her ancestor survived Elmira, coming in injured as he was with the winter and the smallpox. And then Bill mentions that the cemetery in Lancaster, where Reynolds is interred, is doing a rehab fundraiser.
Yeah, that one was pretty good. We went there a couple of years ago. That one was, for the most part, wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
The one that Thaddeus Stevens is buried in is a little bit different. It's up the street a little bit. That one wasn't as good, but it wasn't too bad either. But yeah, some of these historical places, it's an easy thing to forget about the cemeteries in these prison places. We're going to go over to Fort Warren here in a few weeks. Take the big boat over to Boston Harbor and go check out that one.
And that's where Isaac Trimble was held. And that's also where Hiram Granbury was held, which he's mentioned in our last episode that we did, which was about the Battle of Pickett's Mills. Hiram Granbury figures quite prominently at that battle. And he was held at Fort Warren in Boston. And actually, his story is like his wife moved to Boston and then comes to visit him. And you told the story in our episode. And whoever was next to Hiram Granbury in his cell figured out that from what Granbury's wife was telling him, that she had ovarian cancer.
Yeah, he was a citizen doctor who happened to be in jail for something. And I tried to find out what he did, and there's no record of it. But he ends up in a jail cell with him, and his wife comes to visit, and he's overhearing them, and he's like, something, I'm a doctor, and I think I know what that might be. Turns out he was right. And he goes to the prison guards and say, my wife is sick. I think she's got this cancer. And they say, well, all right, well, we're going to parole you then. We think there might be a place you can go in Baltimore to get treated. They go to Baltimore. Of course, they don't get treated. Yeah. And they end up down in Alabama, down in Mobile, I believe, where she dies. And he ends up going back to back to his brigade after that. And it affects him. So by the time he gets to Pickett's Mill, he's 33 years old. And he's fought in some of the toughest battles. Now his wife is gone. And again, 33 years old is pretty young to be dealing with that, even by those standards.
Yeah, and he's got that amazing hair though.
he's got that hella good hair, as Taylor Swift would say, right?
But it's sad what he's going through, and then he's after Pickett's Mill is fought, in June or May of 1864, Granbury is gone by November the 30th. He gets killed pretty horrifically at the Battle of Franklin.
Yeah, a lot of the people who fought here ended up staying with the Army of Tennessee and then going to chase down John Schofield, the guy who indirectly banned baseball in Richmond in
Yes,
the
I was reading
1860s.
that the other day.
How about
when
that,
you
huh?
tweeted. Yeah.
Yeah, so another
Yeah.
guy.
MJ does mention that many cemeteries will allow volunteers to help clean up your areas. And if you don't live near a battlefield, you can always lend your time to local places where soldiers are buried too. So that's another option to do. So I know our friend Ben, he does that.
Yeah.
He does a lot of cemetery cleanups, which is really good.
Yeah, stuff like that is the little things you can do. Everybody wants to work at the battlefield. They want to be this and that. But there's all kinds of things you can do to volunteer yourself that do make an impact. A lot of parks, I know Gettysburg is kind of the volunteer thing is kind of fading out a little bit, but you can still sign up to do a lot of different things to help out. Yeah. I know, the Masonic monument there in Gettysburg there. I'm saying this, of course, because the Masons don't exist, but if they did exist, I would tell you that they help clean up that monument. And the Park Service isn't a big fan of it, but they do it anyway. They go there and they help trim those bushes. They help pull the weeds. They spend a whole day doing that on cleanup day at the monument. So sometimes you see them out there. So, well,
there's a lot of these places that are not just cemeteries, but they are volunteer run. Like Elmira is volunteer. And I think Pickett's Mill is part of the Georgia State Park Service. But I mean, if you go to Pickett's Mill, they are so happy to see you because I think they get a lot of hikers there, but not a lot of people that we walked in there were like, we're here because of the battle.
Well, yeah, Pickett's Mill in Dallas, Georgia. It's out there. It's not. I mean, it's between Dallas and Chattanooga. It's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's out in the sticks a little. It's out in the country a little bit. And you pull up there, and they got this. The visitor center looks. If you've been at Chancellorsville, it looks kind of like that. This little kind of building in the middle of the woods. You pull up and you walk in, and there was a couple of rangers there they showed us around, and we ended up walking the whole Confederate and Union lines. We came back and. They showed us some of their cool stuff in the back. We got to go back in the secret stone cutter room there, and they showed us some cool stuff. But there's a lot of cool places you can go in that Georgia area. For anybody who hasn't been, for the people who are just stuck on the east, Gettysburg, Antietam, and all that stuff, you could go down to Georgia and you could see so many battlefields. You just got to follow the road from Atlanta to Chattanooga. Every 10 minutes, you'll be pulling over a battlefield. Yeah,
there's Jonesboro, there's New Hope Church. There's
you got them coming in and coming out.
Yeah,
you got the Atlanta campaign. Yeah. We talked about all that stuff, Alatoona Pass and Dallas and Resaca and all that. Even Jonesboro, right? Go that way.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, they're coming back. Now you're going to have the actual battle at Alatoona Springs. That's heading back towards Spring Hill. Yeah. That leads to Franklin and eventually Nashville. So you kind of have that same kind of battle road in both directions. And so if you're driving there, it seems like every exit you'll see so-and-so battlefield, so-and-so battlefield. You and I, we pulled over almost all of them. We could.
Yep. Yeah, because we saw, we're like, that was in the Atlanta campaign. That was.
I even dragged your ass to Cold Farm right after that.
I willingly went. It was fun. It was good to go. I mean, I think one of my
where Joseph Hooker stood right in the same spot.
I think one of my favorites though was probably Pickett's Mills because it just gave you you go there and you're like, why would they fight here? The terrain is even worse than Kennesaw. So for anyone who's seen Kennesaw, Pickett's Mill is just that much worse. It's like this, deep ravine that they have to, the Union troops, they got lost. The compass, even their compasses didn't help them. Hazen gets his, I think it's how many men killed? Hazen is part of what's his face? Thomas J. Wood.
He's part of Thomas J. Wood.
Thomas J. Wood, his brigade it's a brigade, right?
Yeah, he's got Ohio, he's got Kentucky, Indiana. He's got people like that. And if you look at the battle, don't forget, you're coming off the New Hope church line, and it kind of extends diagonally. And Sherman tries to hit them front on. He tries to, frontally expose himself, Mary, which is never a good idea, especially for Sherman. And he ends up having to fall back, loses about 1,600 guys, and he's going to send Howard. I don't know if you've heard of him, Mary. Oliver Otis Howard. He's a guy from Maine up the street here. They send around those 14,000 men around that Confederate right to find the flank. And the problem is the terrain. Think of the deepest woods you've ever been in. That's the terrain they're marching 14,000 guys
Yeah.
through. And Howard's got the one arm; he can't move the branches out of the way with too. So this must have slowed him down, right? So they're going through ravines and all these gullies and all this stuff. And if you go there and you find where they're going to fight, they think they've turned the flank, but they really haven't. They hit the very end of it. And there's only a couple of battalions of Hazen that actually do get around that cornfield. But they end up going down this deep ravine, and there's a stream, and they have to go back up again.
Yeah.
And right up top of that is Granbury. And Granbury is
he's not a guy you want to run into.
But you've got Granbury. To his left is Govan. To his left is Polk. And then you got Mark Lowry, who's going to swing around. And these are the iron, the capital I iron of this army.
They're part of Claiborne's division, which, I mean, the picture that I have is from, like, my background is from Pickett's Mill. Claiborne's up there on his horse over on this side on the slope. A couple people. I was say AQ and MJ mentioned Monocacy is another great battlefield to visit. Elsie asked, on your Georgia fun run, did you guys get to Peachtree Creek? That was one we didn't get to. There's a whole bunch. We had to run around. We had to get to the Atlanta Braves game, actually. So we were limited in our time. But we didn't get to Peachtree Creek. We didn't get to Resaca. We did miss.
We did get to Ringgold. We hit as many as we could, but it's just, it's another excuse to go back there. But if you do go, give yourself some time, because we went that 2-hour ride south because we wanted to go to Andersonville. We went there that one night.
If we next time we go, we probably won't go to Andersonville, but maybe we will. Neil mentioned the density at Pickett's Mill is pretty crazy, and he said I got pretty excited when my dad retired to Lookout Mountain.
Oh, Lookout Mountain! So we stayed on the mountain.
Yeah, just on one of the slopes of it. It was really cool. In a cabin. It was really cool.
And you go up to the Great David Ireland fought, 137th, right in that little ridge. And we were there. It was all that fog, just like it would have been. Lookout's great. I mean, it's such a great area, and you go up to Point Park at the very top, and you get to see that vista. But just the tough terrain, like we say a lot of times, is if you just go to Gettysburg, you're thinking these battlefields, these big, vast, grassy fields. Most of these are the woods. And if you look at Lookout Mountain, you look at the wilderness, you're looking at, especially this one at Pickett's Mill. I mean, you can't see 5 feet in front of you. What's scary is they know that the Confederates are there, and they don't know if they're 500 yards or 500 inches. You can walk literally right into them.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a lot psychologically that is going on with this battle as well. Like, Sherman has ordered it, and he, that's what pissed Ambrose Bierce off is, he said in his introduction to the crime of Pickett's Mill, he said, Sherman doesn't mention it, yet he's the one who ordered it. So you order us to go do this, we all die, or not we all die, not Bierce, but all these men die, 20% casualty rate for Woods guys. And he doesn't mention it. And the more, as I was doing research and the more I read about it, the more I found myself getting a little bit just kind of like questioning why would Sherman do that? I understand why Bierce is angry about it, because you completely left those guys that all fought there. So kind of like, why did they fight? To leave them out is that's one thing I would love to know why Sherman just felt just like, oh, I'm just not going to write about this battle. But
well, don't forget too, I mean, he would have got his ass slapped around at Allatoona if he went through the gap. Well, so he goes around, and he's sending messages back to Nashville that I'm going to be in Atlanta in 5 days. I don't think you could drive in 5 days today, let alone go through those woods down. That's how. And so he ends up getting stuck. He ends up getting stuck at New Hope, and then he's got to find that flank, and he actually finds it. John Kelly, that Confederate cavalry, that 24-year-old Confederate cavalry guy, the youngest guy officer they said to die in the Confederacy, I guess, according to something I read. They know they found the Confederate right flank because they hit that cavalry, but it's dismounted, but they know it's cavalry. And so when Hazen finally hits, what screws him is that communication, because 2 of those battalions, as they go through the woods, they're like you, they have no attention span. They just drift away. They just go. And so now these guys are all by themselves, and now you're hitting the front of Granbury's line. Yeah. And the sad part is, if they all follow those 2 battalions, they would have got around Granbury's flank. They might have got behind them, and everything might have been different. But that's what gets you.
Yeah. But I mean, my whole thing is like, why did Sherman not write about it? Like, why did he choose to leave out that specific battle? That's the thing that bothered Bierce a lot, was it was like, you're forgetting all these guys who fought on the campaign, or not the campaign, but in that battle. And I see why, you know, and I read one article about it where the guy was like, yeah, you know, it's pretty bad what happened at Pickett's Mill, but I don't know that it's a crime. And I was like, well, like,
I mean, that's
I think
Ambrose,
what the,
right?
I think what the crime is in Bierce's eyes is the not mentioning it.
Do you think that Sherman maybe didn't write about it to protect Howard?
Maybe, but Howard
mean,
wrote about it.
I'm just saying, or more likely protect himself, because
Oh, yeah.
he just because he cut that distance between Chattanooga and Atlanta. He was just a couple of days, 2 weeks. He was halfway there,
Yeah.
and then he got stalled. So maybe he just wanted to pretend it didn't happen and just go right. Because you're right, he doesn't mention in the after battle report of Atlanta. Does not mention in his book. He writes about everything in that book. He doesn't mention a word about this one. So
I just feel bad for the soldiers and their families, that, you know, especially the families for the soldiers who died there, that it doesn't even, you know, it's kind of not, well, he's not worthy of mentioning, you know. It's just, it's one of those things that I'm like, oh, Sherman, not your best move to.
Well, the battle itself was a mess, though. I mean, he sends 14,000 because he sends a lot of guys, but what gets him is he sends Charles Hazen, and then right behind him, William Gibson's supposed to follow him in 5 minutes behind. And it's 45 minutes later, and Gibson hasn't moved yet. So Hazen, that 45 minutes, loses 500 guys. Yeah. Bang, bang, bang. Gibson comes in. He's going to get astroglided because he's got no support either. And behind him, you've got Frederick Neffler, who's also stuck behind. But he's only got 2 regiments, the 19th and the 59th Ohio. So what's he going to do? He was supposed to be the cleanup guy, and he comes in. And his job is ultimately to help retrieve the injured, you know, from Gibson and from Hazen. And that's what a mess it is. Then Scribner's on the other side. He gets beaten up by Kelly's cavalry again. And finally, Howard's like, the friggin' hell with this.
Yeah, you know? Well, I think that's the thing, is the psychology that's going on here with some of these guys, with Wood and especially Howard too. I mean, this is not a good day for Howard. This is like, you know, it's up there with Chancellorsville for being a mistake. He does not have his best day here. But like,
no, he doesn't.
But I think what it is too, he's still coming off that Chancellorsville, that reputation, right? Like, he's still probably like, geez, I can't screw this up. But, you know, I think it's just over a month later, he's put in charge of Army of the Tennessee after McPherson dies. So I guess like Sherman saw enough in him. But, you know, he's also got to be like, Sherman had told him, you need to attack, and you need to attack now. Sherman's putting pressure on Thomas, who is Howard's, you know, like kind of his commander at that point. And they've got that time, like they've got like, shit, we got to take Atlanta, because Sherman's already said like, we have to take this. But then Wood, his thing is like what's happened to him at Chickamauga. He's the one that, you know, caused, like, is being blamed for the, you know, the breakthroughs, partly his fault, he feels. But then Howard comes in and says to him, okay, we need to move out, you know, when they're going to march to Pickett's Mill. And Wood's kind of like, I don't want to move my guys. And I understand why Wood's saying that, because the last time at a battle, he's been told to move his guys. You know, and but that's the human, but the thing about Pickett's Mill is, when you study it and you look at it that way, you see the human side of it, right? Like what psychologically is going on with these guys. They're not just, you know, robots following military commands. They're having to kind of deal with this different stuff that they have going on with the battles, right?
Well, I mean, every one of these battles, the people are the result of something in the past. And that's why you can't study these battles in a vacuum. You can't look at Gettysburg or Antietam pick a battle. This one, obviously, it's tough to imagine, like you just said, that Thomas J. Wood, that there wasn't stuff in his head from Chickamauga. Had to have been.
There would be, because he's been told at Chickamauga, you need to, you know, move your guys. And he knows if he moves his guys, there's going to be a gigantic gap. But again, he's been already yelled at by Rosecrans earlier in the day. Well, I don't know if Rosecrans yelled at him, but basically was like, you know, Wood is one step away from a court-martial. And all the guys around him are like, dude, you got to move, or else, you know, the boss is like going to like you're going to be sent away kind of thing. So Wood moves his guys and looks what happened, you know.
No, and then even look at Howard. You know, he has that unfortunate experience at Chancellorsville, Mary, where he got routed.
Although I don't
And
care who you are,
right,
if you're John Reynolds or
right.
George Meade, you're Howard, you're getting
So
routed.
Howard's thinking, you know something? This time I get to hit the right flank. I get 14,000 guys.
Exactly.
I'm coming through the woods. I'm going to pull the rope on him,
Yep.
you know, the rug on him. The difference is Howard gets lost, and he
Yeah.
sends that message to Sherman. You know, we're paraphrasing. We found the Confederate flank, I think.
Yeah, when you put "I think" in something, you're like, I would be if I was Sherman, I'd be writing back, okay, you think or you know.
And Sherman's probably like, oh dear, you know.
Oh, and Thomas is probably like, oh no.
They told you, I've been telling you, that's why.
Yes,
But so it's a very similar game plan. So you have to think, human nature being what it is, that he thought he wasn't going obviously against Stonewall. He's going up against the against primarily, you know, Cleburne.
Well, going up against Cleburne, who is, I'm sorry to say, I know we have some Stonewall people on there. Cleburne is way better than Stonewall.
No, my point is, it's like, it's not like a revenge thing, but I have to think, being human nature being what it is, when Howard's going around in the woods about to hit the Confederate right flank on a sneak attack with that many men, he had to have been thinking about Chancellorsville in reverse. Like, what a chance. But again, it's what happens. It's what happens when you don't really reconnoiter the area. They did get out there and try to look, but the terrain is significant. Everybody who's been at Chancellorsville, it's bad enough, but that's a walk in the park compared to Pickett's Mill.
Oh, it is. Like Pickett's Mill, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, Kennesaw, sort of, but like this is just way worse. And the thing is like it stuck in, you know, you could tell it stuck in Howard's head because he mentioned specifically in his memoirs, he said, you know, there's a few scenes from the Civil War that, you know, really got to me. One of them was Gettysburg, one of them was Antietam, and then there was Pickett's Mill, and that one was way worse. And he also said that the night there would always be a nightmare for him. That
it must have been a tough experience.
It was because he specifically mentions, you know, eyeless, armless, legless soldiers walking around, and he said that the ones that weren't injured were resorting to drink. And he doesn't, you know, go into his whole Christian general thing over it. He basically says they're drinking because they can't stand the situation they're in right now. It was that bad at Pickett's Mill. And Pickett's Mill is a lot like, you know, it's typical of the fighting you see in 1864. It's a lot like a very small version of Spotsylvania.
Well, right. And right around there, Spotsylvania is that's coming on the east, but you really see that beginning of that real hardcore trench warfare then. And we're going to be doing Cold Harbor here in a week or so. Not this week, I think next week we're doing it. But you're getting into that real hardcore, those trench fighting. When we talk fighting at the old Gaines Mill battlefield, going back there again. And if you study Cold Harbor, what's brutal about it is Lee and Grant, they're both losing men left and right. And Lee can't really replace them, but Grant can. But the men he replaces them with are going to be the heavy artillery dudes who've been sitting around playing cards in Washington for 2 years. I think 8 Connecticut, people like that. So they're going to have to come down with very little experience, and they're going to get thrown right in. And it's some of the stories. I mean, obviously, thousands wounded in 15, 20 minutes by just marching straight on to this. And so it turned into that, just line them up. You know, Lee's like, we're just going to line up and fight right here. And we have to defend it. And Grant's like, I have more men. I'm going to keep going right through it. Yeah. And again, that we'll talk in more detail about that. But Pickett's Mill, it's trench warfare again. Yeah, and it's very, you know, as AQ said, the 1864 fighting is she said it's wicked hellish, and it is. And the one thing that you know, I was reading a story about Pickett's Mill, and actually it was an article about it, but it started off with a story about Sherman and a Confederate soldier that he was having a beer with after the Civil War. And Sherman said, "Who'd you fight with?" And the guy said, "I fought with Cleburne." And Sherman was said to have raised his glass and said, "We need to toast Pat Cleburne, because whenever we were up against him, we knew we were going to have to fight." And Sherman did say he was the best fighter
that the Confederates had.
Claiborne was good at strategy, but also execution,
Yeah.
right? Sherman was an engineer. He could read maps.
Sherman was good at coming up with the battle plans, but
You know,
when it came to execution,
you
couldn't
know,
like
you like to say, he has a pornographic memory, all the things you say about him. But I think he wasn't I think it's not an insult to say he wasn't the best game day fighter on the battlefield. He wasn't. He
No.
just wasn't. He'd like to go around. He'd like to fight head on. When he did, he was impulsive, got his ass kicked. Kennesaw, obviously Pickett's Mills. So there's a bunch that he does. Chickasaw Bayou. You just pick one. He pisses on his leg a lot when he fights, but he's a great strategist. Lee was obviously a great strategist, great execution, but he kind of, the fastball kind of started to go away later in the war. Jackson, for all the stuff people talk about Jackson, he had his good days and his bad days. He certainly did. People love to talk about the Valley. They love to talk about fighting Banks. They love to talk about the march around McClellan. They love to talk about the Chancellorsville experience, but they don't like to talk about 7 days. They don't like to talk about Kernstown. They don't like to talk about things like that. But again, every one of these people has their own cult of personality with that. But when you study the actual X's and O's, there's no one better than Claiborne in the South. There isn't.
No, he's just, in Pickett's Mill, when we did kind of the closer look at it, I really saw it. I really saw as good as he is, he also is lucky that he has great subordinates. Granbury, Govan, Polk, the fighting bishop's nephew, Lucius, that's that is something right there. If you can have, as much as you have a good commander, you got to have the subordinates as well. And those are some hard fighting guys, like those Texans that Granbury's got. These are like battle tested guys that and Howard's going up against. He's like, well, I think he found out, and who knows when they saw that flag. There's stories that whenever the Union guys saw the Claiborne's division flag, which was also Hardee's flag, but it was like, oh God, we're gonna have a fight, because that's the division that fights.
Oh, there's no question. He had some of the hardest fighting. Granbury himself. His story is such. He was a hard fighting dude, smart guy, very similar background to John Brown Gordon, actually. An attorney who grew up and became captain of his company, rose to his command of his regiment, and he just kept rising and rising and rising. And him getting cut down at Frank was really unfortunate, because he was a young and up and coming guy, early 30s, and although I'd love to find out why he changed the spelling of his last name from B-R-Y to B-U-R-Y. There's a town in Texas called Granbury, Texas. You can go and visit it. And I've actually been there. That's where I saw a tornado one time, Mary. I saw a tornado in Granbury, Texas.
No fun. Yeah,
it's a nice place down there, though.
AQ says Claiborne was the full package. That's absolutely true. He's like, he would look at now he's not perfect. He has bad days too, but he would look at situations like, how can I make this better? Like, after Shiloh, he realized if I had sharpshooters, I can take out the artillery, got the horses and the guys, and that might help me, again. David mentions Beauregard for president. He should have run against Old Jeff. That's in reference to something I said earlier on Facebook about, I'm reading this biography about Beauregard as we call him. And I found out that after Manassas, there's this whole political drama thing going on between Judah Benjamin and Jeff Davis and Beauregard. Anyway, it was November 5th that they were going to make it official, kind of that they were going to move it from provisional to permanent for Davis being president, at least until the next election. And Beauregard was asked by a few people to run, and he was like, no. And then he said after the war that he regretted it. So that did get me thinking, would he have been a better president? I'm sure he would have. As William says in his biography, anybody would have been a better president than Davis. But that was just something interesting I read today, that I didn't realize that Beauregard had been asked to do that. And he regretted it. And I think he would have been a great president, or no, I shouldn't say great president, but I think he would have been a better choice than Davis.
No, he had a stately thing about him. That's a tough situation with that. I think we've said before, he got a bad deal. He did. And I'm not surprised he got sacked as early as he did, because he did look stupid at Shiloh. He did.
He talked back a lot, though. That was the thing. I had someone say to me, well, Beauregard should have been let go after Manassas the way he spoke to Davis. It's like, well, do you know how Davis and Judah Benjamin were kind of like the back and forth with that whole thing, that, and Beauregard's kind of telling them we need to go into Maryland, and Davis is like, no, we don't. Like, we're not going to, like, Davis was just kind of biting back for the sake of biting back, but Beauregard had a tough time. And the other thing that Davis didn't like about him is Beauregard and Joseph E. Johnston were very close. They were very good friends. And Johnston was his superior, but he didn't treat Beauregard like that. And Davis didn't like that. Like, Davis hated that, he would just kind of like treat Beauregard as an equal, sometimes almost like Beauregard was the commander. And Davis did not like that.
No, he pushed him. Davis, I think he liked the people who agreed with him. John Bell Hood comes to mind.
Yeah.
A lot of cases. And Beauregard, he was what he was.
Well, I don't think if Beauregard had been president, I don't think we would have seen Bragg as a military advisor.
Well, I mean, we've said before that Davis would, more than anything, he wanted to be a commander in the field.
Yeah.
So you wonder if Beauregard or Alexander Stevens or one of those guys would have been the ultimate president. Don't forget, when he got elected president, he told Varina, he goes, this is not a good thing
not
here.
my thing. Yeah, no one ran against him.
They named the president. He's down in Mississippi. He gets the word that he's president. He's like, oh shit, but he did adapt to it. But he knew he was taking all the risks, because if that war didn't go out his way, he was probably thinking he's going to get hanged.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you'd have to be hanged.
Yep.
So probably what would have happened. Poor Henry Harrison, but I think he wanted to see these other guys who went out and fought some of these politicians who did their thing.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it worked out. But I think taking Beauregard out of the field and keeping him out as long as he did really hurt, especially with that roving misfit toys that were rolling through the Army of Tennessee.
The Army of Misfit Toys. They can't find a good commander.
They're like the American League Central Division baseball of generals that are. I mean, when if Burnside was a Confederate in the South, that he would have been one of their best generals. He probably would have been.
I mean, they had great subordinate officers like Claiborne, but
no, they did. They absolutely did. They had some great ones. And then when they brought a Longstreet over at Chickamauga, I mean, you have that great breakthrough with those 8 brigades there. But it ended up getting support. They were pretty good. But the problem was always at the top. And somebody somewhere was on social media fighting with you, trying to say that Bragg was not disliked by his subordinates.
Yes, yeah. There was someone a few weeks ago trying to tell me Bragg was not disliked by his subordinates, and that's one. I'm like, there was a freaking petition.
And if I remember correctly, that person was a pretty learned person who said that. I forget who it even was, but again, that's what you're looking at. People sometimes look at certain people with certain type of tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And they don't want to hear anything badly about them. And some people look at people that they're only bad.
Yeah. Well, that's because Williams in his biography about Beauregard, he's very blunt. He hates Bragg. He hates Davis. He makes no bones about that at all. And it was a quote from that book that I got about Bragg. And it was one of those things where this guy I kept saying, okay, well, yeah, I agree. Not everybody hated him, but when you have a petition going around, it means they don't like you. They don't want you to command them because they don't have confidence in you.
Right. And that's not to say that everyone hated him. I mean, but the people with the loudest voices and the sharpest pens are the ones who told that story. But Bragg certainly wasn't a complete disaster. I mean, he certainly wasn't. I mean,
he's a great organizer. He was a great organizer. There's some good comments here. Shanna mentions that in her opinion, too much was expected of Jackson when he marched down from the valley for the 7 days. Not saying he didn't make mistakes, but there was external circumstances in addition.
No, there always are. There always is. And it's not to say they did a horrible job. And to say people are overrated doesn't mean you think they suck too. No, okay? It just means that they maybe get a little too much praise.
Yeah,
I
think Sherman's overrated now, and that's after years of studying him. And he was he was my favorite commander. And I think the more I study him, the more I see him as being overrated. And then, MJ mentions that Kernstown was where Stonewall threw Garnett under the bus, and David mentions Stonewall loved putting his subordinates under arrest.
Oh, he did. Don't forget too. He arrested A.P. Hill,
Yep.
heading into Antietam. That whole thing. You have a lot of things that happen with that cause these issues with this. I mean, with the 8th Virginia, he mentioned Kernstown. Garnett gets put in this horrible position. Nathan Kimball's going to slap him around for a while, and Stonewall's in the back. He's probably all jacked up on his muscle super horse, sitting back but he's in the back. And by the time he makes it to the front, his men are owing it up the road, heading up the other way. And so he's going to court-martial Garnett for retreating. Well, what was the alternative? Getting captured or getting killed? Yeah. I think he chose wisely. As the monk in the movie Indiana Jones said.
He made the decision that it's like, well, what am I supposed to do in this decision? I've got to make a decision. So it's like, I think he made the right choice there. And Garnett would walk around for the rest of his, what was to be a short life, with the court-martial paper, and he wrote lies all over it.
Well, that was always the thing too. I mean, Jackson, he was a hard disciplinarian. He maybe would have court-martialed himself at Kernstown if it wasn't him. I mean, think about it. But there's a lot of that. Don't forget too, after all that stuff went down, Jackson was going to quit. It took the governor of Virginia to talk him out of not leaving the army.
Yeah.
Stonewall was going to take his ball and go home.
Yeah. It was
quite a situation. This is not, obviously this isn't saying Stonewall Jackson's bad at all. It's just that people look at only certain things. And I see Shanna on here, and I think of McClellan right with her, and he's the opposite, where people tend to only focus on the negative.
Yeah.
And some of the minority opinions or some of the stories that have been debunked have become historical fact. And they kind of paint with a broad brush over people, where McClellan, Sickles, all these people are just the good, the bad. There's bad, right?
Yeah, like you still can't.
There was a kid I went to elementary school. His name was Jeff, and he was a real prick, always in trouble. And the teacher called him Bad Jeff. That's what she called him, Bad Jeff. And I remember as years went on, and always stuck in my head seeing him, Bad Jeff. Right. And so, no matter what he did, no matter what good he did, he could have won the Pulitzer Prize. He could have found the cure for a rash. Okay. And there's always going to be people who are going to call him Bad Jeff. And that's what McClellan's deal was. And he spent the rest of his life pretty much. And don't forget, he did step in quite a bit on his own. But there's a lot of perception. And it's because there's some authors who have some have a lot of publicity and a lot of fame, who use their own personal opinions to spin against people like McClellan, or against Sickles, or even against Meade, or shall I say Lincoln.
Yep. And Howard.
Right? Yeah, of course they do.
The McClellan example is a great one, because, back when we started this podcast, like we did an early on episode about Antietam, and then we did a wrap up, and you and I were talking about, like, well, wait, the more we looked at it, we're like, well, wait a second, this is not McClellan's fault. There's shit going on that the administration's doing that they need to take some blame for too, and then that book came out, The Tale Untwisted, which I think Shanna, when she and I were talking in Richmond, she said it's really, really good, and I cannot wait to read it. But it's nice to see the scholarship slowly starting to change about McClellan. You still have your people that are going to be like, he sucked, but then like you'll argue back with them, and then their next argument is, well, he ran in the 1864 election against Lincoln, and he was like for slavery and all. It's like this, like, holy geez. And Shanna mentions the White House propagandist John Hay. Yes, she and I were talking about John Hay and the propaganda.
Well, they all have their PR departments. Obviously, we talked a lot about Walter Taylor with Lee, especially with the Gettysburg Campaign. They all did it. But I think if you really study, and I mean really study Antietam, I'm not talking about the cornfield or that. I'm talking about the post stuff. You need to have to really suspend reality to really find a way to stick it to McClellan for that retreat in real time. Mm-hmm. Because this was not a Pickett's Mill slam dunk victory here. This was a 51 to 49% reporting type situation. You're telling me that you get your ass kicked. I know you had a reserve army. I know this. Oh, they had the reserves. They didn't use them. Well, of course, that always happens. But you're going to tell me you're going to take that beaten army when people like Meade are saying we have no supplies, they've got no food, they're wiring for supplies from Washington over and over and over again. They're getting nothing back. And then so without those supplies and all those men damaged, you're going to go into Virginia heading in the wintertime to go chase down Lee?
Yeah.
I mean, that it's just logically speaking, it doesn't make any sense. Now,
No.
people think the other way. People think you had Lee over a barrel. You're going to pin him against the Potomac, and that might have been true too.
Your army's tired, just like it was after Gettysburg. And David makes a great point. I do agree with this. Lincoln was the worst armchair general ever. He was kind of armchair.
Lincoln. You know about Abraham Lincoln? What's all?
Yeah.
I make a sure. He's general.
Yeah.
No,
no, there was this one, and I've talked about this letter before, where like there was all these reports, newspapers coming out after Gettysburg, and they were slamming Meade left, right, and center. And Howard finally had enough. He wrote Lincoln and said, okay, here's the situation. Here's what we're reading in the paper. And this is the case right now. Told him everything that was happening in the AOP, that they're tired. They need supplies, all this other stuff. And Howard basically had completely was done with it. And that letter was found like in Lincoln's files, and it was marked as unofficial. So I think that was kind of an off the record letter that Howard was like, you know what? Like, this is what's happening with us right now. And they had witnessed it before. You know, Meade was one of the ones that after Antietam had written his wife and said, we've been forgotten. They're not sending us supplies, you know?
Yeah, no. And Lincoln, you know, we talked a lot about the Peninsula Campaign with McDowell, speaking of Jackson. I mean, you're going to take all of that division away from your army without telling McClellan to go into the valley. I mean, he was, but Davis was the same. He was an armchair guy too. They both were.
Oh yeah,
they both were, absolutely. But Lincoln was one who, from his Black Hawk War, notice the enunciation. I can't say that wrong. But he felt he had war experience. He studied a lot. He read a lot, and so he felt that he knew. But also too, you've got Winfield Scott, who's 400 years old and 400 pounds. So he's clearly done. And you got a good guy in McClellan, but don't forget, you start with McDowell, and then you got garbage like John Pope, Ambrose Burnside. Your best ones were probably before Meade anyway, McClellan, and then Hooker. Hooker had his issues because everyone hated him.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get to Meade, he was that settling voice, that calming voice, who had to change that whole narrative in like 3 days before Gettysburg.
Yeah.
And even he gets disrespected when Grant takes over.
Exactly. But he gets shit from Lincoln after, which isn't fair. But I mean, I think Howard, like that, I'll have to find that letter from Howard, because it is a really it's basically Howard just being like, hey, the media needs to slow the roll. You need to step in and say something. And I sometimes wonder if that is the reason why, because that letter came to Lincoln the day after he'd written that one letter to Meade that he never sent, and he kind of put it aside, and then he gets the letter from Howard. I sometimes wonder if that was when Lincoln was like, maybe I shouldn't send this letter where I'm basically chewing Meade out for not, maybe I really don't understand what's going on in the field.
No, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, and you want to get on Kent Masters and Brown going, ask him why he didn't chase Lee down, right? After Gettysburg, you can put him in a heart attack situation, because that's just not right. But again, that's what the perception is. That after, and a lot of that comes, you know where that comes from too, is Grant afterwards. When we talk about Overland, he fights in Wilderness, goes right to Spotsylvania, goes right to North Anna, bang, 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 all the way through Cold Harbor to, and so he's like, something, maybe if Meade attacked him just like Grant did, it would have been over quicker. Maybe if McClellan did, right? Because that's what Grant did. But you're looking at this with a 20 years, being your benefactor. You're looking back and saying, something. Grant stayed on him. He kept fighting. He didn't fall back. Maybe if these other guys did, then maybe it would have ended sooner. But the problem is, you're assuming the other guys didn't do it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, the situation was different.
The assumption is that Meade sat on his ass and didn't do a damn thing. playing with this turtle, right? And McClellan was slow, and he wasn't going to do anything after Shiloh. I mean, after Antietam,
which is not true about McClellan.
But exactly. But when you compare with that 1864 Overland narrative, you go, you know something? Shit, I wonder what happened 2 years ago if McClellan had chased him like Grant did.
Yeah.
I bet you they could have won. I wonder if Meade could have done it, and that becomes fact after a while.
Yeah, and it's not a fair comparison because things.
And it's the hamburger helper of history, Mary. That's what it is. It's the quick and easy solution. Bang, bang, bang. I'm not going to take the details. This is what I think is going to happen because it seems to fit. And then you end up fighting in bars or on Twitter with people. If you don't, and that's what happens. So I think I figured the whole thing out, Mary.
And then you get people on Twitter that don't want to study it very much, and they're just like, "This is what happened,"
or they saw the movie.
Yes, that's another one. David said there weren't any supplies. Banks lost them all. He put a fire symbol.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the whole thing, you know.
Shanna mentions it's shocking how little had been written on supply chains during the war. I strongly feel a lack of understanding on the matter is a big part of why McClellan's actions are looked upon as they are. Absolutely, I agree with that. Absolutely, it's because when you bring into the supply chain, it's like, well, yeah, if they don't have supplies, how are they supposed to move their freaking army?
Even Burnside got boned by supplies.
Yeah,
when we were talking Fredericksburg, this is a guy who he sat on his ass all day while Lee, strengthened up Marie's Heights and Fredericksburg. Yeah, because Halleck didn't send the pontoon boats. Mm-hmm. And so what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
But that's the thing that gets you is it's like anything else. That red tape, which still exists today in every aspect of anybody else's job, that's just as bad. The communication, we've said before, communication kills you. Look at Pickett's Mill. Terrain, communication, and weather. One of them is always going to get you, but communication, especially on the general side, I mean, it's brutal when you look at
especially when the boss, like Sherman, is telling you, we need to do this and we need to do this now. And you probably know, like in Howard's position.
I mean, look at the Battle of Iuka. We don't talk a lot about Iuka, right? Yeah. With Rosecrans and Grant. That was a communications cluster to the F completely. And it ends up going on Rosecrans later. But it depends on how it's reported. That Cincinnati newspaper goes to Grant on information that was obviously given him by Rosecrans. Yeah. And Grant ends up spinning it around and basically gets rid of Rosecrans after Chattanooga. Yeah. But these mistakes are made, and there's going to be a fall guy. All of it, right? Yeah, and that's what happens. And the ones who stand at the end are the ones who have the most Teflon, or the ones who can withstand it. But Grant gets a lot of credit for not backing up, and that's a good thing. Yeah. Because if he'd have fallen back after the Wilderness, and he would have let Lee get to Spotsylvania, because at that point Lee's thinking, I'm still defending Richmond. Grant is going after Lee, but he would have set up, as bad as Spotsylvania was, it would have been a lot worse because the Union ran them for the first half of that battle. And then Hancock's boys unfortunately got smoked when Gordon and the rest of them came in that second half of the battle after you lost all his guns over there at the Muleshoe, right? So, but that's what happens. Mm-hmm. He didn't fall off. He goes after Spotsylvania. He ends up continuing along. They fight at the North Anna River, right? Yeah. And then it ends up at Cold Harbor, and they keep going around and around. It ends up at that siege of Petersburg. And that was the only way you're going to beat him, because Lee is losing men left and right. He can't replace him.
No, and I mean they're both doing that, but Lee's losing more. I think.
Grant's replacing them with people. The paper boy. Yeah. The people, the troops were making fun of these people. They were coming down because they just literally sat at the big guns around Washington, never fought for years. Now they get called up and they have to come into battle. There's very little training. Yeah, and they're the ones, for whatever reason. They're the ones who were put right in those initial attacks, right there at Cold Harbor, and they get slaughtered. They get slaughtered, and it's not even not a fault of their own. It's just that you're going up against about a 5-mile defensive battle line in Cold Harbor that stretches, from the old Gaines Mill battlefield all the way past those breastworks. And Lee has had a long time to build those really good breastworks now. Right, we're talking. They're digging 4 feet in the ground and they're putting logs on top. They're basically building trenches.
Yeah, that's
and they have almost a 5-mile battle line, And Grant keeps coming one after the other, bang, and just getting cut down and cut down and cut down. He chose poorly. Grant did is what he
Second
did.
Indiana Jones reference.
It is.
David said, "I'm not sure what to think about the analogy of meat in this turtle."
Well, you'll figure that out yourself,
AQ said she spit her beer out. Shanna mentions that McClellan was by the book to a fault. All the military theorists he looked to stress defensive action while in enemy territory. And I think in some ways he's like Beauregard in that way, like Beauregard's issue. And the thing I love about the Williams biography about Beauregard, we switch back and forth between Beauregard and Beauregard, is that it's very balanced. Like, he will call him out for the stuff he did wrong. And he says, like, throughout the book so far, and I'm right before he's gonna get sent west, is that Beauregard's biggest problem was he could not get away from a textbook. So if somebody like went against the textbook and was like doing some military strategy that wasn't written about or tactic, he was like, oh, we can't do that, And I don't know, he might have changed as the war went on, but that was Beauregard's biggest fault. Was he was so textbook.
No, and I think what got McClellan is he had the smartest kid in the room, the guy in the room thing going.
But he was still he's still so unfairly treated.
But that doesn't mean he was wrong about a lot of it, though. Exactly. He knew he saw what happened in Manassas, and he knew that they weren't ready for prime time, so he had to train them.
Yeah.
And everyone at that point still thinking the war is going to be 30 days. It's going to be a joke. It's going to be, what was that line about cleaning up all the blood with the handkerchief? That guy said,
all the blood spilled will be, you can.
Yeah. We fought about that. I remember that one night.
She said Shanna said that, by the book is Little Mac and the Peninsula Campaign. Yeah. So Beauregard and Mac are probably very much alike.
Oh, and he, I will say that they give White House Station. I think they give them too early. And they did, Jeb did have his run around. He had his moments with a lot of that with Stewart, but I think when you look at it, we've said this a million times. If you think of the Army of the Potomac like a house being built, you had McClellan who built that foundation.
Yeah,
and then all these other generals built on top of what McClellan did. So if Meade was around at the beginning and he was in charge, maybe he's the one who gets ripped on historically, because I think anybody in that position, after watching what McDowell did, right?
Yeah.
You knew that army needed to be built, needed to be trained. And so maybe he's accused of being too slow. Maybe McClellan comes later in the war. He ends up being a national war hero.
Yeah.
And he's on the quarter today.
The quarter.
Talking
about the Canadian money you saw this weekend.
Oh, that was what a wonderful country. I give you a purple piece of paper, you give me beer. It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing.
MJ has to head off. Thanks for stopping by, MJ.
Oh, MJ, it was good to see you. It was good to see you the other night too. We had a good time at the restaurant with MJ the other night.
That was fun.
It was beers and beebed. That was a good night. A good night.
AQ mentions that the first mass heavy artillery was one of those that sat in the defenses of forts around Washington. Personal accounts from a private who wrote home said how unprepared they were to go into the real fighting.
They were, think about all the men. It was 17,000 men the Union lost between Spotsylvania and the Wilderness. Mm-hmm. And so now that the Confederates are losing men too. But Grant needs guys.
Yeah.
Because he goes to the bullpen, right? And he's going to bring in his heavy artillery. But these guys aren't trained, not really. And so they're basically being trained as they're marching into Virginia.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they're put right at the front. And they're the ones who are going to hit right at the beginning of that battle. And so when you look at it, it's no surprise what happened. No. And you were going up against like I said before, those breastworks, real, and they were spectacular, Mary. They were, and you had to go up against them, and they just got mowed down.
Yeah,
there's that fantastic story about a guy. He's a flag bearer. This is the Battle of Cold Harbor, and he's walking with a flag, and for whatever reason he doesn't get shot, but all the men behind him either get shot or they turn and run. He ends up getting about 100 yards of the Confederate breastworks. It's him by himself with the flag. All his men are gone. So just picture he's walking, and all the Confederates are yelling at him, "Go back, go back, go back," because they don't want to shoot him, because it's a moment of personal bravery. But he doesn't know, as he's carrying the flag, there's nobody left behind him. He's literally by himself, walking. And he stops, he turns around and says, "Oh shit." And you know what he does? He salutes the Confederates, and he turns and walks away. All the Rebs start cheering.
Yeah.
As he walks away.
Wow.
But those are cool stories when you get really into the weeds of these battles. But it just goes to show how brutal they were.
Oh yeah.
And how miserable they were. They talk about stepping on skulls from Gaines Mill. They're walking across the old battlefield, and they're literally tripping on bones as they're walking.
Yeah, that's I can't even imagine. Travis is on here. Hey, Travis.
Hey, Travis, I saw you on the parade on the TV.
He was at the
we were watching
the Memorial Day parade.
Watched the Addressing Gettysburg feed. We saw you with your hat. So we said, "Hey, this is Travis."
Yeah, Travis is a really cool hat. David said, "Oh, bring in the AA guy with the 6.9 ERA. That'll go well."
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, welcome to Red Sox baseball, David. But that's the thing. Was it's not like you're bringing in the Iron Brigade here. You're bringing in new green troops.
Yep.
Now, they weren't completely like the ones who were defending Washington or the men and boys defending Georgia and Sherman's March. They were trained. They did, put index finger in the side of your trousers. They went through all that, but they still they were green as far as battle goes. And they're fighting the ultimate war-tested Lee's army. Right. Yeah. And so who was entrenched in a defensive position on almost 5 mile defensive line. That was kind of Lee's last stand, because if they got through Cold Harbor, it's about 9-10 miles away from Richmond. I mean, we were there not too long ago. Then Lee says he gets a free pass into the city at that point, and then it's over. So he threw the whole grand finale at Cold Harbor as far as defense. And but then what happens? Greg goes around him again, goes to Petersburg, and then just starts the siege. But Cold Harbor is brutal. It's just brutal. That whole Overland campaign is just a meat grinder. It really is.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Just back to McClellan again. Shanna said regarding White House Landing, McClellan was ordered to split his army, resulting with Porter on the other side of the Chickahominy. Mack was hyper aware of the dangers of the river, better an army and the supply base.
Yeah. Yeah, and so. There's
McClellan
no
is a fascinating study.
He is, and if you can get away from that whole McClellan Sickles
Lincoln
mentality, where this guy sucks. I don't know why, but I just know he sucks.
Well, that's what you're talking about David Oakes with at Elmira. He loves Sickles.
That's a surprise, because we were talking to him, and we just happened to mention Sickles, and his eyes get all bright. Oh, it's talking to Hessler. It's all excited. I'm like, oh, you're a Sickles guy too? Yeah, because Sickles, I think when you study his, and I go, Dave, what do you think of the Charles Payne map? Oh, I think it absolutely existed. It's like, all right, my man, you got it. You see, but it was a good conversation.
Well, you can have respectful conversations.
Yeah,
because, I mean, I know, like when we had Hessler, and I don't think did he agree with the Payne map? I don't.
No, he's the one who was really, if you know your Rangers, the one who really back in the day, there was a Ranger who his name was Chuck Teague. He's not there anymore. He retired. He moved away. And a friend of mine was a Ranger that says that his wife dragged him, and you can still see his fingernails on the front deck of his house as he was dragged away from Gettysburg. That's what he says. But he retired. But he was a big Payne map guy. The Charles Payne map is at the Library of Congress, and the question is, did it exist? And most people think it did, but you can't prove it. Hessler, if I remember correctly, he's not 100% on board with the Payne map, but I think at the same time he acknowledges that it probably did exist. It's just whether or not Sickles had it, and that's why he followed those plans. But it's a good debate, though. That's what's good about it.
Yep. David said, Lincoln and everyone's favorite creeper, Stanton. Really screwed Stanton as a creeper.
No, Stanton was the guy. I mean, for all the people who rip on McClellan thinking he's the smartest guy in the room, it's Stanton. Oh. Because he's the one who felt that he was really in charge. He was in charge of the government.
Yeah.
I'm in charge here. And it's ironic that him getting canned is what brought down Johnson. Andrew Johnson, really, for when he got impeached there. Mm-hmm. But then Stanton dies pretty quick.
Yep.
He was going to go in the Supreme Court, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, he was going to be a justice there. That was,
Yeah.
well, I think that was always what he wanted to do. But I think in some ways they were putting him there just so he couldn't run for president. You know, kind of like, let's keep him away from this.
Yeah, well, he was
office.
definitely an ambitious fellow, right?
Yeah,
And
and the thing, you know, the thing that gets me is that, you know, you'll have people, especially ones that, you know, kind of they study Lincoln, they'll be like, yeah, well, like McClellan wasn't very kind to Lincoln and he said some nasty shit about him in his letters. It's like, okay, first of all, everybody did that. Secondly, those letters were originally not meant for public consumption. Third, Lincoln did it too. And fourth, the person that first called Lincoln the original guerrilla was Stanton in Cincinnati during the Reaper trial case.
yeah.
So it's like,
oh, you could totally see these guys not respecting Lincoln. Lincoln's some hayseed guy from the Midwest, and there's a lawyer and blah, blah, blah. And he gets elected, and they're all like, oh, this is a guy we can puppet master this guy between Halleck and Stanton and all these guys. And Buchanan wanted nothing to do, turn and ran, see you later. It wasn't like he was around to help out.
Buchanan.
So is Buchanan. But that's how it is. I mean, politics is no different then like it is now. It's the same
there
thing.
was all the insults being thrown around, and like McClellan was not the only one insulting Lincoln. We just know about it because we have his letters, which were not like, you know, I've had someone saying those weren't meant for public consumption. It's like, well, no, they weren't, but they're, I mean,
well, somebody didn't clear his history cache, Mary, and that's the problem.
I know, but Lincoln was saying the same stuff. He said,
"Oh, I know they were.
Rosecrans," and everybody's like, and then, but then people say, "Oh, that's Lincoln's sense of humor."
Well, that was the thing when he said Rosecrans was like a duck in the head. All the stuff he would say, it was the people, the capital L Lincoln community people think he was George Carlin, this greatest comedian of all time. Well, he were
being kind of a
where he was kind of being condescending and kind of being a dick.
Yeah.
But there's a fine line between being funny and being a dick, Mary.
There is.
Very fine line.
Exactly.
Tell me about it. I hear that at work sometimes, but that's another story.
I've heard it too.
But that's how it is. Hey, real quick before I forget, because we will, while people are still signing on here, is our event we're going to do on July 1st in Gettysburg,
yes.
Right? So Spangler Farm, 4:30, July 1st. Be there at B Square. It's going to be a free tour. We're partnering with the Gettysburg Foundation to do a tour of Spangler Farm, the 11th Corps Field Hospital, which is where Louis Armistead died, George Nixon died, and it's going to be a private tour, and it's free, and you can come, and we'll have a representative, our friend Mark, who's going to do the tour from the actual place. So you'll get to, when the place shuts down at 3, we're going to be able to come in there for 4:30, and we're going to do a tour. So if you want to go, just let us know. Like I said, it's totally free. You're welcome to go. And Travis, I expect to see you there, Travis.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think there's a few people on here that'll be there, so that's good.
And so, but definitely go because it'll be a lot of fun. And then maybe, just maybe, we'll find beers afterwards with the force.
Probably.
I bet you we do. But that'll be a good time. I'll look forward to that.
David mentions, can you imagine the saltiness that would have been in Warren's letters?
Yeah, Warren was an angry fellow.
Or Thomas, because his wife burned all his letters.
I'm not sure how pissed George Thomas was. George Thomas, I have to think that he didn't like Grant and Sherman and Blackjack Logan because they didn't like him. He had to have known.
Well, Thomas was also very close with Rosecrans, and he saw the way he'd been treated. And
maybe
Thomas was very I know Howard really respected Thomas quite a bit, said that he was, he was a really great commander, like one of the best they had. But I think like Thomas just was put in this really weird spot, your boss / good friend has been ousted, and he's been ousted by the guy that is coming there to be in charge of you. And that's got to be really, really awkward for you. And Thomas is also the one kind of giving reality to Sherman, saying after Kennesaw, and I think this is also because of what happened at Pickett's Mill, like Sherman's like, we can keep fighting battles. And Thomas is like, if we have any more battles like Kennesaw, we're not going to have an army. Yeah. We can't keep fighting these pitched battles.
No, and there's no question. So hopefully, look at the covers. Hopefully, Travis is go. Travis,
Travis asked if we're going to Daniel Lady. We probably won't be at that, unfortunately, but he's going to be in it this year. We've thought. Bill said he'll be there.
We'll be there, and Mary, you can wear any podcast shirt you want. You
Yeah.
have a good time. You knock yourself out. But, but it'll be a lot of fun. We'll have a lot of fun.
So
So hopefully
there's-
people will go, you know.
There's someone on here, Tom is on here, and he said that he recommends our show for Civil War education. So thank you.
Oh my God, what are you doing to those poor kids? No, that's
But then
pretty-
he also said that her daughter or his daughter wants to teach history as she's a junior in college. She's starting her Civil War education with Battle Cry of Freedom. Any additional must-read Civil War books? So I'm sure some people on here can chime in with that, but you know, the memoirs like Grant Sherman.
The Grant memoirs are a must, without a doubt. But I will say my own personal opinion is, instead of starting high and working down, start down and work up. Start with the soldier diaries.
Mhm.
Read, Charles Wainwright's diary. Read Abner Small's diary. Read Elijah Hunt Rhodes' diary. Read the Company H diary, because it'll tell you more of what's going on. Because most of the generals' memoirs, especially Sherman, especially Grant, it's their what I did summer vacation type things. They talk about their accomplishments.
Yeah.
Well, you'll learn that blood and guts, grassroots type thing from below. But I would definitely, McPherson's Battle Cry of Freedom is a real
Great
good
place
one.
to start.
But what I did was, I fall in love with Gettysburg, the battlefield. So I read as much as I could about Gettysburg, right? And then from there, I kind of worked my way out. So you start from Gettysburg, you start to read things like Antietam or Harper's Ferry, and then you kind of go and then you realize how the battles all played in each other.
Yeah, you kind of find
right.
your battle, and yeah. So Shanna and Neil both recommend Hardtack and Coffee. I would definitely say echo what you say. Find a battle and start reading about it. I mean, for me, it was like, yeah, Gettysburg was kind of my first battle that I got into, but then I got into Chickamauga, and that led to the whole thing with the Western Theater. Reading about that, but like, just kind of find your thing and just kind of branch out from there. Like, there's so many Civil War books, but if you can find primary resource stuff, like even, the internet's a great place to find that. Like,
and the other thing too, visit the battlefields. Have her visit the battlefields, because when you visit, I just don't mean the big boys, but when you visit the battlefields,
like Monocacy,
or Pickett's Mill, we've been talking about, when you study them afterwards, it makes a lot more sense, right? And you'll learn, and it sticks a lot. But I give kudos to her for teaching history, because that's I think it's the most important thing you can study. I could not do math. I could not do science. Still can't. But I did history. I always stuck, right? So if you would do that and you help teach history, the people that they're teaching will realize how relevant it is to today. Right. Yeah. And so that's what's great about it.
Yeah. Oddly, I could do science because I did biological anthropology, but I couldn't do math to save my life.
But you do math as well as you drive.
Oh God. Alex had started with a biography about Grant, then Sherman, then Beauregard, and now I'm at Battle Cry of Freedom. Yeah, that's another thing too. Just find biographies and read them as well.
Yeah, and I would suggest too is read more than one book on some of these people, because you could read a book by Kent Masterson Brown on George Meade, and you could read a book by Gelzo on Meade, and it's like two different guys. You're going to get their slants. Doesn't mean one's wrong, one's right, but the truth is usually somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But you'll get a different flavor. There are definitely some books, like the Douglas Southall Freeman books, on Lee, where he falls in love with them, and it turns into a book where he just glorifies them. And there's no shame in that. That's what he wanted to do. But if you read other things, just read, question what you read, and read as much as you can.
Yeah.
But definitely visit the battlefields, because that's the best thing. That's what resonated with me. Was understanding the stuff.
And then David mentions that, the web page with the soldiers' letters that are transcribed as well. I think Dr. Carmichael told us about that one.
Yeah, private voices.
Yes, private voices, but
just
put in Civil War in the Google search.
Yeah, be careful with speaking of clearing your history cache. Make sure you Google that one right.
Yeah.
But if you go into private voices, you can read all the diary, a lot of the soldier letters. And a lot of it's the mundane stuff. Like today, I went and caught a fish down at the stream, and me and Jethro split it, and then we played cards. But there's a lot of it's like that. But a lot of them talk about things. They see certain things, they talk about it, and whether they say whether it's right or wrong, it's what they thought. And so you get
it's what they were feeling at the time. And I mean, like, the thing with, if you just read Sherman's memoirs, you're going to have you'll have a good idea what went on during the Civil War, at least where Sherman was, but you're going to be missing stuff. You're going to be missing Pickett's Mill. You're going to be thinking that Missionary Ridge was a great victory for him, and it wasn't. And that's just, he's writing his own slant. He has his own bias on it. But then if you go and read, I mean, obviously I enjoy Howard's memoirs, but
Who?
I especially enjoy it from the Western theater standpoint, because he is experiencing the same thing Sherman is at the same time. Because you got to think, when he goes out there, when he's there with Sherman from Chattanooga, the battles of Chattanooga, right to the end, they're experiencing the same thing. And it's like reading two different experiences.
Yeah.
Like they're the same events. And that's the thing. That's why the memoirs are so important, because
I think we were saying earlier, that's what a lot of the big problem is people will read one side of it and they think that's just the gospel, right? And then when you try to question something that maybe is a different slant on it, they think, no, because I read it in this. And there's so many good books. It depends. The Gettysburg itself it's got the Fonz books, it's got the Coddington books, it's got Sears, it's got Trudeau, it's got all of them.
Yeah.
But they all have a different slant and different angle on it. That's why you got to keep reading this stuff. And you'll find, if you do read a lot, you'll find out that, like we just said a little while ago, maybe, just maybe, McClellan wasn't as bad as people think he was. Right.
I like McClellan, and I still get, like, there was somebody that they had finished Sears' book on Antietam, and they were going on about how much they hated McClellan. And all I commented was like, you need to read more. Like, this is Sears' version of events.
Well, because a lot of the battles, for some of the real big boys like Grant, there are people who they don't know about the Holly Springs, the bad losses that Grant had, because they just don't study it, because it's not mentioned. You're not going to hear about it.
Yeah. Tom has a question. Oh, sorry. Tom has a question.
Go ahead. All right, go ahead.
So no, go ahead.
Nope. No, I was just going to say, he got his ass handed to him. And that was embarrassing. That really stalled that Vicksburg campaign. When he screwed up Holly Springs, and you've got Sherman screwed up Chickasaw, and they're lost going from the swamps, and drinking with
Soy Smith is in there too somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Tom asked, what was Burnside's role in the Battle of the Crater at Petersburg? He was watching from across the field, but was he part of the problem there?
Yeah, he was. He absolutely was. That the crater was a bad thing, and that was, basically, this is what we want to do. We want to attack. This is basically, it was his brainchild, but his fingerprints are all over it. We want to attack the crater. Here's what we're going to do, and they screwed the whole thing up completely. The thing blows up. It finally blows up, but he's nowhere to be found. This is when Ledley's hammered drunk. He's supposed to be charged in the assault, and this is a full call me maybe situation with Ledley. I mean, he's David Hasselhoff with the hamburger in the hotel at this moment, and all these poor USC-2 troops go in the damn crater, and they all get gunned down. It turns into a massacre. But it's a great idea. But it wasn't the first idea. They were going to blow up Kennesaw. Remember, they were going to try to blow up that line.
Yeah, they had tunneled under, and they're like, nope.
But there was a good idea, and they're walking across the field. They try to be quiet. The canteens are all jingling. Shut up, everyone! Shut up! And they're trying to be quiet. And they finally get there. They get the dynamite in there. And then it just Burnside screws up, and then he does the whole Colonel Klink thing. I don't know. And doesn't want to take blame for it. But that's another disaster with that whole thing about communication.
Communication.
No one told the guy, when you blow up the big hole, don't jump in the big hole. Go around the big hole.
Yeah.
They jump down there, and they get stuck down there, and it's shooting fish in a barrel. But Burnside, absolutely. He's a good Massachusetts guy, New Englander anyway.
Yep.
Should have known better.
I haven't seen his grave. Tom says he likes how our shows get in the personalities of the generals and how their egos or mental state affect their decision making. Thank you. They're humans.
Well, I think when you have to do it that way, because when you study this and you're looking at Polk, Govan, Granbury, Lowry, it doesn't tell the whole story.
No, it doesn't tell like what's going on the battlefield. Like, you don't know that on the other side of that, on the Union side, you have a guy who is messed up hard in the Eastern Theater at Chancellorsville, and he's still trying to change that, get away from that ghost. and that's Howard, and you have Wood, who is trying to get away from what happened at Chickamauga, and they're getting pressure from Sherman, who's already said it's going to take us 5 days to get to Atlanta.
There's the thing about it is these are people. Everyone wants to outdo the other person,
Yeah.
and when you look at history, there are so many things that changed history going forward because of personalities, because of ego. We've told the AP Hill story at Antietam a million times with him, right? You read the battle reports, right? Burnside's taking the bridge, and the Confederates are about to be routed. All of a sudden, AP Hill shows up on a white horse with his men from Harper's Ferry, pushes off Burnside, saves the day. The Confederacy lives.
Fight march.
But people don't study why AP Hill left Harper's Ferry to come to Antietam. And we've said this before. I'll tell the story again. He was pissed at Stonewall for getting court-martialed, wanted to prove himself. McClellan
took his girlfriend.
Dated his girlfriend when they were in college, so he hated McClellan, wanted to get his ass for that. And then Burnside owed him money. And he figured if I go get Burnside, I'm going to get my money back.
$3,000 was it?
For $2,000. So for three very personal reasons, he left Harper's Ferry where he was supposed to stay. And because of those personal spite reasons, he helped save the Confederacy at Antietam and helped him get away from almost pure, complete disaster. So that's what's great about history, these little stories that change the narrative with these. And they're all people. And it's all people.
Exactly.
And you know what? And who knows what happened? But what kind of proves that story we said later is Burnside has that $2,000 to pay that spy at Fredericksburg.
Exactly.
And it's amazing that the numbers are the same because he paid a slave. He paid a local $2,000 to spy in the Confederacy. So he had the $2,000. So there's probably truth.
A lot to pay somebody.
That's a lot of money, but there's probably a lot of truth to that. But
Yeah.
that's the story with AP Hill, gonorrhea notwithstanding.
So Travis mentions his Pennsylvania boys bore that tunnel at Petersburg. And then Gentili says Sears Gettysburg is good for an overview. And he said he's avoiding my glare because he knows how I feel about Sears. I don't hate Sears. I just don't like how he is towards Howard and McClellan. He's very just, I don't know. He said, and then he said that Kent Masterson Brown's meet at Gettysburg would be a good one after Battle Cry if you're hooked on Gettysburg.
I think Kent Masterson Brown's Retreat from Gettysburg is the best Gettysburg book there is.
It is.
Because what he does, he talks about the battle and he doesn't gloss over it, but he just hits the main points. But the perception that Lee walked away, that July 3rd happens, Pickett's charge, they shake hands, they say good game, they turn, they walk away.
Yeah.
That's right. But it's obviously that's not what happens. And guy with Judson Kilpatrick, the cavalry to go chase down Lee. Because if you're George Meade here and you just win this great battle, your first big battle as the big man in the big chair, are you going to do a reverse Pickett's charge, go back across the field the other way and against all those other thousands of Confederates who haven't fought yet or are still okay? And not to mention, they were scared of those mountain ranges of Lee setting up in there, fighting a defensive mountain battle. So Meade did the right thing. He chased him back. But again, that's the thing is that's why that book is so good. And the one he does on Meade tells the beginning part of the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah. And they're really,
right.
they're great to read. Tom mentioned he watched our episodes with AP Hill and Antietam with the spike.
Yeah. But again, those stories are cool though, because they're just like, you could see someone today doing it. Thinking, you know what? Burnside's there. I want my money. Friggin' McClellan's there. Stole my girl. And if I do well here, my ass has been court-martialed. I want to get out of this. I want my mail get that dropped. Pure personal reasons.
Yeah.
So we go.
And you can drive that whole spite march.
You can. You can go right. You can't go the water at Shepherdstown. You have to go over the bridge. But you. That's
because we drove it. We said we're going to drive the spite march. AP Hill's spite march from Harper's Ferry.
And the funny thing about AP Hill is we have fun with AP Hill, but we're talking Overland campaign. He couldn't really participate because he was always sick. He was just sick, but he was around to be an advisor to. That's why it's ironic he got killed at the Appomattox campaign because he always stayed in the back, but He was sick at Spotsylvania. He was sick over or Cold Harbor. He was just Gettysburg. He just vanished, disappeared.
No one knows where he is.
He was, he's where the hell he was. He wasn't around. So he's a fascinating guy in a lot of different ways. But he was a good soldier though, and his men loved him.
Hey, he's one I don't know too much about, and I'm trying to learn about all more of them on both sides, and that's why I got I discovered the treasure trove. I work at an academic library, and I was doing kind of an inventory on a few books the other day, and I discovered I had not looked at the Civil War section yet. I don't know why, I just hadn't had a chance. I'm there, and I'm like, holy God, there's all these, and they're all the old classic, all these older books, right? My next one I'm going to read after I'm done the Beauregard book, or Beauregard, is Lew Wallace's memoirs, because that's going to be a fascinating thing to read too.
Yeah,
especially with Shiloh. So you have Sherman's account of Shiloh, you have Grant's account of Shiloh. I can't imagine what Wallace is going to say. And I mean, I love Lew Wallace. He was another one, a lot like Beauregard, got treated really unfairly, and was a scapegoat, because it's Grant's I can't blame Sherman for what happened here, so we'll blame Wallace. We'll say he was late for everything. Meanwhile, it's
the Wallace thing, because he was still carrying that stink around from Shiloh.
Yeah.
And so he's labeled as someone who's chasing butterflies in the woods and getting lost and getting there late. So he's already stigmatized. So if they already have that scarlet letter on him, you're going to keep pigpiling on him. You're going to blame everything but the Lindbergh baby kidnapping on a guy like Lew Wallace. And he doesn't get the credit he deserves for Monocacy at all.
No, because he really did save Washington in that battle.
Well, I mean, who knows what's going to happen if Early gets into Washington? He's not going to hold it, but he's going to destroy stuff.
That would not have been a good situation.
No, he's going to burn stuff, and he's going to cause a big mess. Like we say, he's going to Beetlejuice the town. He's just going to cause a lot of problems. But it's right before the election, right?
Yep.
And so it's tough to say because in Washington, Lincoln would have had to have been retreated take on Washington, and it would have been a bad look for all them.
Yeah, it would not have been good, and I think there's three things that needed to happen for the election to be secured for Lincoln. And one of them is Monocacy. The other is Sheridan in the Valley. And I mean, God, Sheridan in the Valley is way worse than Sherman and going through Georgia. But he's breaking the morale. But I think Sherman getting Atlanta is kind of the third thing. But I think if Early gets into Washington, I don't know how much Atlanta is going to matter at that point. I mean, I think it will, but not as much as what it does. Now, Sherman in his memoirs makes it seem as if capturing Atlanta is the greatest thing ever. And because I did this, Lincoln won the election. It's would you?
Well, Atlanta was big though. I mean, it was because it was the big supply in the area, supply hub, the railroads. I mean, you had to have Atlanta. Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
You had to have it. I mean, the March to the Sea is a little overrated. It just is.
Even Sherman admitted it's overrated.
Right. But the Atlanta campaign, marching into Atlanta, from Chattanooga, fight, because they did fight some big boy battles. We talked about, obviously, Kennesaw, Dallas, Resaca. I mean, they did fight battles along the way, but getting into Atlanta, taking Atlanta, was a big deal, because psychologically it was big, but it was also militarily big in supplies, and perception wise. If Atlanta falls, Mobile and all these ones, they start falling like dominoes.
Yeah,
and that's the thing.
Yep.
So there's all new buildings in Atlanta because of Sherman too.
I know exactly. It looks like a new city. Shannon said that she's heard accounts of A.P. Hill wearing his red shirt to battles. While researching shirts for my cavalry impression, I learned that it was thought by some that red shirts brought good health. David said, unfortunately for A.P. Hill, that didn't really work out. And John Gentili said that red shirt worked for Garibaldi. And then Tom asked, could you replicate A.P. Hill's red shirt and make it available in your merch store?
I mean,
it's like the basic plaid shirt, isn't it?
It's just a red shirt, Yeah. I don't know. I mean, if that's Ken Rich in town, Travis, if it's good luck or not, because he's doing his tours down the Gettysburg town tours. But the
actor still lives in that area, right?
Yeah. No, Ken's a guy. He's a tour guy. He's a guy who's down there.
Okay.
But yeah, the guy who portrays A.P. Hill, he's down there too. But yeah, he wore that. It was kind of like Edward Cross with the bandanas. They
Yeah.
that's what he did.
Yeah,
But
just a
he was
basic red, like,
it was just a red
right, yeah.
shirt. He was sick, but he was sick a lot though. But again, they were a lot of them were sick. I mean, these guys had dysentery and cholera and freaking
Yeah,
everything. No Flintstone vitamins back then, Mary.
no. Shanna said to David Wright, at least he tried the good health thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's true though. It's true, but yeah, I mean, every day wearing. I mean, to me, that would be like a Target wearing a red shirt.
Yeah,
You know,
like I no. I mean, I love it. It's great. I mean, he stands out in the Gettysburg movie because I've watched it with friends before, and they're like, "Who's that dude with the red shirt?" I'm like, "That's AP Hill."
no, yeah, AP Hill. He's a interesting guy, but he has yeah, he didn't make it. He didn't make it, unfortunately for him.
No.
That was a big loss. What was strange is when a lot of these Confederate big name generals died. A lot of their last words were about AP Hill.
Yeah, Jackson and
Jackson
Lee.
mentioned it. Lee allegedly mentioned it. So I don't know what the hell this because AP Hill was the man of their dreams, man.
I was reading, wasn't that mentioning Confederates in the attic?
That was mentioned, but that's
yeah.
I mean, they mumbled about ordering AP Hill, to this and that. But yeah, that's if you read the stories. I mean, no reason to think they're wrong, but that's what a lot of them say that they talked about it. So, well, who knows? Who knows? But I like AP Hill. I think he's an interesting guy. He's certainly one.
He's an interesting one to study. I mean, there's David said AP Hill, the Spite March for 1862 on a shirt.
We should.
Oh my God.
Well, after John does his Buster Kilrain, Colonel Darwin tour in Gettysburg, we should set up.
He's got a book coming out about it, which is called Buster: The True Story of Buster Kilrain.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I'm going to read that. And I'm glad I finally found his name on that 20th Maine monument. Though people don't think he exists, but his name's on that monument. You just got to look close. No question about it. His burial, his where they buried his bloody armpits. Two of them. They're somewhere in that battlefield. They'll find them and do the recollection of the work they're doing.
Spite March tour shirt.
Spite March will be fun, but we should get ready to shut off, Mary. It's almost 9:00. My goodness, almost bedtime.
It is. Yeah.
It's bedtime. Well, this is fun. So yeah. So what are we doing? What are we doing? Doing something here.
We're not dropping an episode this weekend, but next week. So a week from Friday, we will be dropping our episode about Cold Harbor. We're going to record next week. And then we're not sure when our next live stream is going to be. We might do another weekday edition, just depending, because we've got lots of stuff coming up. So
do you know why they call it Cold Harbor, by the way? It's not cold nor a harbor. But you know what it is?
I don't know. It
was a tavern of an inn. And they call it harbor because it was like a harbor. You could, you could come and you could stay there. And it was called cold because they only served cold food.
Interesting.
So it's like Cashtown Inn. If you said Cold Harbor, it was a harbor to bring your place. You can come off the road. But Cold said they didn't serve hot food. So it was called Cold Harbor.
Interesting.
Just one of those stupid things that no one knows. But
no, that's good to know. David also said AP Hill would have gotten on well with Hooker, Butterfield, and Sickles, the Bang Barn extravaganza.
Probably where he caught it, probably. It's probably a Tilly Pierce sighting in here somewhere.
Remember when we thought Bushrod was a big party animal?
If your name is Bushrod Johnson, because you know what his porn name would be? Bushrod Johnson.
Same with Sterling A.M. Wood.
Sterling A.M. Wood is the greatest name of all time. Just is. But yeah, he wasn't at all. And neither was George Custer. The ones you think these party boy mentality types, they really weren't.
You know who the ladies were really into from start to finish of the Civil War was Beauregard. Like they would write him these letters, and there was 3 ladies that lived in I can't remember where it was, but they sent him, each of them in their letters sent him a gold button, and when he put the buttons together, it said "Let us out" on the back or "Get us out" on the back. Like Beauregard was loved by the ladies, and I'm like, okay. So I see where the rumors come from.
Well, he was a sharp-looking guy. He had that light Creole accent, dressed well. Yeah, you can. I mean, those uniforms with the gold braids, you look pretty sharp, though. You do, right? Yeah, I mean, Earl Van Dorn threw around more balls than Larry Bird the Civil War. EVD. And these guys, everybody loves a man and a soldier, Mary. I mean, a uniform.
Poor EVD.
Yeah, it does. It is.
Not enough for him.
Anyway,
Yeah,
all right,
oh,
well,
Jim Sammy said thanks for the info. Yeah, thanks for being
oh, hey,
here.
Jim, what's going on, Jim? Hey, good luck. So I think Lisa might have jumped off, but Lisa's doing
Yes.
her tour
Yep.
again, her speech down
Tudor Hall.
at Tudor Hall in Bel Air, Maryland, down at John Wilkes Booth's house there. So if you're in the area in Maryland, go see Lisa. She does a good thing with that. And yeah, for us, we'll do Cold Harbor, and then we'll go.
And actually, well, after Cold Harbor, this might very well be our next episode, but yes, we are going to finally do an episode about Oliver Otis Howard, but it's not going to be about Howard at Gettysburg. It's going to be about Howard after Gettysburg to the end of the Civil War.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
So kind of pick it up on July the 4th and right through to right before he takes over the Freedmen's Bureau.
I'll have to hose you down after that episode.
No.
Anyway. All right, so let's jump off here. So we have a great. So today's hey, it's Hump Day, Mary. It's Hump Day. So tomorrow's Thursday. The weekend is around the corner. So it's gonna be hot here. Hopefully, it's gonna be nice and warm where you are as well. It's battle season. Get out to the battlefields. Hopefully, get out this weekend, see some cool stuff. Go see history. It's just waiting there to be seen. So, any final words from you, Mary?
No, just thanks for everybody for coming on here for these. We're on here for nearly 2 hours. So thank you for coming to hang out with us as you guys always do. We appreciate the comments.
It's how fast the time goes when we do this. It does.
No, we realize we've just got too much stuff going on this weekend. So we weren't going to be able to get on here. So we were like, let's do a weekday one in the evening. So might do these more during the summer just because of our own schedules. So
yeah, no, a lot of stuff going. So, all right. So everybody have a great rest of the weekend. Stay safe. Enjoy. Hopefully you can find some beers this weekend, whatever keeps you happy. And so, Mary, we'll see you here on